Well, I am a fan of Timothy Hinman because he was one of those brave, rugged, determined pioneers who opened up this territory for settlement. And I'm continually amazed at what he did. And you may know that he was born in 1761 in Woodbury, Connecticut, and he joined the Revolutionary Army at the age of 15. And he was with his brother, and the two of them built a lot of bridges and did some road surveying, but they were also in several battles, and in fact, the two of them were among just a handful of survivors of one of the battles in the Revolution. And so after the Revolutionary War, he went back home to Connecticut, and he became a school teacher, and he married Phoebe Stoddard, and I think life was a little too tame for him. And southern New England had filled up with all the early settlers, and people had big families, and if you were a younger son of a large family, there wasn't a lot of land for you. And there was a lot of opportunity north where there was cheaper land, and there were no roads going out west, so it was more like, go north, young man, go north. And so he had the opportunity to come up to this new territory in Vermont and do some surveying and see the very top of the state. And he immediately, was interested in getting land in Derby right near the Canadian border, because he thought the future for him was trading with the British when all the hostilities were over. And so he was able to buy some land, and then he had to get there. And the one road, he came up along the Connecticut River, and then came up the Connecticut River and then took the Bailey-Hazen Road, which ran northwest. And he wanted to take that Bailey-Hazen Road till he got to the place which was as close as the crow flies from Derby, and that was Greensboro. So he came up and built a log cabin, and then got his wife and 2 children up here, and they lived in the log cabin, and he was one of the early settlers of Greensboro, though not the earliest. Greensboro and Craftsbury were the first towns in Orleans County settled because they're right along the Bailey-Hazen Road. So he had arrived in 1791, and then he proceeded to build the road up to Derby. And you have to realize that at this time, it was all dense forest. And the trees, a lot of the trees were 200 feet wide, 200 feet high, and 6 feet in diameter. I mean, it's amazing. As we were driving here, I was trying to imagine all the trees I saw being twice as high. It must have been just amazing. And there was all kinds of undergrowth, and also there were trees that had fallen down and were just rotting logs. I mean, what a world he came into. And so he was a surveyor, and they did have maps, so he could see, which direction he wanted to go up to Derby, and then he surveyed it and began building the road. And when they built the roads, if there were trees in the way, they tried to cut them down as low as they could get them, and drive over them and go around. And pulling stumps was really difficult, but they slowly widened that road, and it started out as a footpath, and finally by 1794 he was able to go along that footpath all the way up to Derby. And then he took his family there, and there's a story that Abby Hemingway tells in her Child's Gazetteer that may not be totally true, but is a good story, which is the way a lot of history gets passed on. So he built a cabin up on Derby Pond, and there were Indians who lived up on Derby Pond through the winter, which is interesting to note, that the Native Americans did stay through the winter, and they always lived near a pond. And so he took his 2 older children, a boy and a girl, up to the cabin, and Gail Sangre has pointed out to me that Phoebe's 16-year-old sister was also visiting, so probably she went with him because he left the kids there, and because he couldn't take the whole family at once, and his wife was still at home and she was about to have a baby, so he deposited the kids there and he arranged for the natives to take care of them and bring them food and bring them wood, and he went back down to get Phoebe and the baby, and he got down and Phoebe was really, really sick and he couldn't bring her back, and then there was a giant snowstorm and he couldn't get back up the road, and you can imagine that Phoebe was quite distraught, and she said, "You've got to go up and get the children and bring them back." So it was in the winter, and he headed back up the road, and he struggled through all the snow and barely made it. I mean, he took his life in his hands, and he finally arrived, and there were the kids playing with the Indians and making baskets and happy and warm and safe, and he thought, I can't bring these kids back to Greensboro, you know, it could be terrible. So he left them there and came back home, and he got back home and Phoebe said, "Well, Timothy, where are the children?" And he said, "They're happy and hearty and they're the first settlers of Derby." And then in the spring, Phoebe had the next child, and in the spring he did go up and get the kids, bring them back, and then the whole family got it together, and then the whole family then moved up to Derby, and they actually settled in Derby in 1774 or 1794. They were out of Greensboro. But Timothy was a mover and a shaker. He was the first settler of Derby. He organized the whole town, and he was the county judge. And I'll let Gail tell you more about Timothy's life in Derby. I'm going to talk about when he was a young man. He was 30 when he arrived in Greensboro, and he was strong and rugged, and the fact that he built that road is quite amazing. And I went to the Vermont Archives, which is a fascinating place to go, and you can definitely immerse yourself into early history and maybe never come out. And I saw an ad that landowners in Glover and Barton were going to be taxed 1 cent per acre in order to build the roads, and they could work it off if they wanted to. So that's, the people who lived near where these roads went through were the ones who worked on the roads, built the roads up, and it was a continual thing. And ultimately, that Hinman Road became the stagecoach road, part of the stagecoach road between Boston and Montreal. And if you walk on it now, you would wonder how possibly a stagecoach could get down it with 2 teams of horses hitched to it. It's just, and what kind of people were the stagecoach drivers who were willing to take that responsibility to get that stage through there? I've walked the Hinman Road. I brought my map, which I actually made this map many years ago, and it's because I'm a cross-country skier and I wanted to find all the old roads because they're the most fun to ski on. And we live right there. So you can see that's my interest in the Hinman Road, is that. And so I'm going to talk you through the map of where the Hinman Road goes. And this is actually, because we live there, I put this together with four top.
I just want to let everyone know that we have maps for you at the end of the whole length of Hinman Road and also through Greensboro.
And this map, it just starts with the Skunk Hollow portion. So it does not include from Tolman Corners to there, which I'm not real familiar where that goes. But starting in Skunk Hollow, so the Freeman farm is right here. And I am interested in who owns the land from the Freeman Farms gate to the Greensboro line, but it's very nicely maintained, except that there are logging roads going off of it and maybe four-wheeler roads. It's not wrecked by four-wheelers, but clearly there are four-wheeler tracks on it, so somebody's recreating back there. But from the Glover line right here up to here, which is part of this wild section, it's the nicest hiking trail, skiing trail in the whole batch. That's all owned by Black Hills Timber Company. And they have laid down a few trees and some big boulders right at the line, and it's all to keep motorized vehicles out. And I know I've been kind of on the back burner for many years thinking about making this a historical hiking trail, and that's the big fear. If you open your land with a trail, four-wheelers will get on it, and so the fact is you got to figure out a way to out-engineer them and, you know, put boulders in the way or trees down, but at the same time let skiers and hikers through there and possibly a grooming machine. So it's kind of tricky, but through this area, which I walked today, it's on the Glover side. If any of you know what giant hogweed is, there's little giant hogweed trying to sprout in the middle of the road. And through here, there are a lot of cellar holes, and on the Greensboro side, there's a cemetery, the White Cemetery, and there are a bunch of gravestones that are just leaning up against a tree. And White Road is over here. That's the White Road right there. So the White family was here. And I have in this notebook here, I have all these lot maps. And of course, you know what, you know, the original proprietors of a town like Glover is 6 miles by 6 miles. And they're 12 lots down, 12 across, half mile by a half mile. And the original proprietors' names are on there. And we had a historian in our town, Jean Borland, who was among the many town historians that are the unsung heroes of Vermont. And she drew every lot in town in a square, and she went through all the land record books from the very beginning and jotted down who owned the land when, and then they sold it this person, and they sold it this person, and little details about, like, one widow, you know, all that she had then was one table and 2 chairs and a bed, and it was all worth $12. Or that the first Samuel Cook was the first settler in Glover to settle down on the Greensboro line, and that he had built a log cabin in 1805, and it had a hole in the top for the smoke to go through. So I don't know where she found everything she had, but a combination of letters and old newspapers and all the town records and the road books. That information is out there, and I'm just now have the time to start delving into it, and I'm finding that you can crawl into ancient history among people who lived here 200 years ago and feel like they're your friends. In fact, Joni Alexander, who's in our Glover Historical Society, says she has more dead friends than alive friends because she knows so much. But if you want to, this is amazing, she's done that. So in this lot map, this is where the Hinman Road goes, this yellow. And so I have in here the lots on either side, and that include the Hinman Road all the way through Glover. And I'm sure you could fill in what is in Greensboro, who's lived there. But clearly, you know, up until the early 1900s, there was all kinds of land being bought and sold, and there were a lot of landowners, and the road was being used. and even the milk truck was going down it. I believe the stagecoach, at one time it was a stagecoach road, but the other thing that happened in Glover you may have heard about was Runaway Pond.
Microphone.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. You may have heard of Runaway Pond in Glover, and that was when Glover tried to steal Long Pond water from Greensboro. And so Long Pond was right where Route 16 is, and in fact, Route 16 goes through what was underwater in Long Pond. It was 1.5 miles long, half a mile wide, and 100 feet deep. And it was the headwaters of the Lamoille River and drained towards Greensboro. And then about quarter to a half a mile away was Mud Pond, which was the headwaters of the Barton River, which drained north to Barton and eventually to Lake Memphremagog, and then eventually out to the St. Lawrence Seaway. So that it's the height of land there, and where is it here? I think this is it. This is it right here. This was it. This was it. So they would have realized clearly that Long Pond was a much higher elevation than Mud Pond, but they only meant to take just a tiny bit of water from the surface of the lake because there had been a drought, probably caused by the settlers themselves, because when they took all the trees down, they dried up of the land and there was less evaporation, and they just changed the climate. Talk about what we're doing to the climate, which of course is terrible. They did it early on, so it just affected them locally, but they dried out the whole area, caused droughts. So there was not enough water in the pond to run Aaron Wilson's mill. So he had this idea of letting out just a little surface water, but they started digging from Mud Pond to Long Pond and went through this hard pan into quicksand, and the entire lake ran out in an hour and a half, and it went blasting all the way up to Lake Memphremagog. So because that did that, it cleared all this road. It just like pushed out all this sand and knocked down all the trees. And for 15 years, there was all kinds of debris, and they were trying to burn stacks of lumber, and it was a mess. But actually, it laid down a good gravel path, and that ended up becoming the main route going north up to Newport. So that took the stage route, and that's how it's connected with the Hinman Road. They didn't need to travel the Hinman Road to go north anymore just from there. They still did, and I'll continue on with the Hinman Road here. So you get through Skunk Hollow, and then there's a road that we call the Hinman Road in Glover, which actually was part of the Hinman Road, but the original road was a little off to the side of that road, because you can see 2 stone walls and parallel lines of giant maple trees. And that's kind of the way you recognize old roads. And also old roads, sometimes they jump back and forth in their beds, because one route would get a lot of ruts and water, and road turned into brook, and so they would swap over and have another road bed, and then when that turned into brook, the other one was dried out, and they'd swap back and forth. So a lot of times you find these roads that have kind of 2 parallel roads, and then now that we improve roads, there's a road, and you look to the side and you notice that actually the original road might have been along the side. So that that's the Hinman Road is actually a road now, and then it goes up and crosses Shadow Lake Road between Shadow Lake and Daniels Pond, and then it goes through this section here, which we call the Swamp Road, because that road drops down. There's an outlet of Daniels Pond that runs to Shadow Lake, so it goes down towards that stream, and then comes back out. And so sometimes you can just sort of ford the stream in your car and don't lose your car. But right now I understand there's some beavers that have built a dam here, so you really can't do that road anymore. But it's a class 4 road. It's not plowed in the wintertime, and it's a great ski road. And then that comes into the very top of Perrin Hill Road. Perrin Hill Road comes from Route 16 like this and then kind of turns, turns at the end. So that end piece is still a road that people drive on, and that was the Hinman Road. And there's a little cellar hole right there, right off of it. And we think it was somebody's tavern. Don't know a lot about that. And then it goes on what used to be a class 4 road, which is now plowed, and that's called the Young Road. And it goes right through our neighbor's dooryard, Loudon Young. And in fact, oddly enough, this geographical map, they didn't even put that road in, and this was like 1987, so they don't know everything. But anyway, that road's there, and there's cellar holes off that road. And then it comes up, and then it parallels it. This is what we call the Parker Road now, and the original Hinman Road is parallel to it, but up on the side of the slope. And the thing about roads they built in the 1800s, they were building those for horses and oxen, and they didn't want them to have a very steep slope, so they would go around the sides of hills. And that's why the old roads are curvy, because they tried to kind of maintain the elevation and make it very gentle. And then in the 1900s, since we were driving cars, they just wanted the roads to be straight, so they go up the hill, down the hill, up the hill, down the hill. So anyway, so this came along the side of the hill, and this is a back road. That's a nice hiking road, skiing road. And then that comes along here, and right here are the remains of the first settlement in Glover, which we call the Parker settlement. But in 1798, Ralph Parker came up Timothy Hinman's road and started the first settlement in Glover, and he was the real estate agent for General John Glover's and his associates who were granted the town. So it's now the Skidoo Trail, and the Parker Road goes right along the lake here. So the Hinman Road goes above the lake and then wraps around Lone Tree Hill, and then crosses over Bean Hill Road and goes right through Giselle Clark's Daffodils. And then this is a very wild section that I have walked, and there's a lot of raspberry bushes you have to wade through. It's hard to find the road, but you can find the road. And it comes out on Ingersoll Lane, which comes off of Roaring Brook Road. And when we walked out, when we explored it, the Ingersoll said, "Oh, we haven't seen anybody walk out this road in 50 years. So then it comes down, and then there's a road called Breezy Hill Road, which is above the fairgrounds. This is the Orleans County Fairgrounds. Anyway, and the actual road you can find, it's off of Breezy Hill Road, and there's 2 lines of ancient maples that show you where the Hinman Road was. And then it comes over here, and I'm not I just drew this line because I know he would have, the road went somewhere and it would have gone mostly straight. I don't know exactly where it went there, but you see it kind of curved toward Barton. Barton was already a village, so it was important that he take his road close to Barton. But a lot of the early settlers in Barton had come up from this direction. So anyway, he goes through Barton and then crosses the road, and then mostly Maple Hill Road, which is where Maple Manor Nursing Home is. It goes up that road, and then, let's see, where am I here? Okay, it goes up, this is Maple Hill, this is kind of the back way to Orleans. It goes up this road, and then the road bears to the left, but the Hinman Road heads straight, and then once again it's a trail. and you can ski that road, and it comes right out in the back fairway of the Orleans Country Club golf course. And then it's the Orleans Country Club Road, crosses Route 58, and then it is, it's called Churchill Road after the old vet Stan Churchill, but it heads right up towards the Old Stone House, which is, well, it's up here is the Old Stone House, and the Old Stone House was built to be the dormitory for the Orleans County Grammar School, which was the first secondary school in Orleans County, built in 1823, and it was put on the main road, which was the Stagecoach Road, and there were actually stagecoach inns in Brownington, and it was a thriving little village. And the grammar school is in Brownington, which is the town in the exact center of Orleans County on the main road. So it was kind of a no-brainer to put the first secondary school there. And then it just continues up that road into Derby and to Derby Pond, where Hinman lived, and he continued it on to the Canadian border. And he also built a road over to Norton, and he also built a road from Derby over to Lake Memphremagog. Some people think that he built roads up into Canada, but Gail doesn't think so. So she's a long-time researcher, and I bow to what Gail has to say. There's, we've thought for a long time that we should have a connecting trail through Orleans County, and I actually went to some meetings at the Craftsbury Outdoor Center. There are a lot of people who want to have ski trails that connect, that Hardwick connects with Craftsbury and Glover and Greensboro, and the Hinman Road is kind of a key piece in that because it's the longitudinal thing you could actually get from there to trails in Westmore. If anybody's such a rugged skier that they can ski all the way from Greensboro to Westmore, you could have a way to go or a place to stay on the way. But it's a long time thought, and we're still thinking about it, and maybe you will too. Does anybody have any questions about this route or about anything I said, or should we let Gail have her turn?
Let's have Gail talk and then
Yeah.
questions.
Oh, Randy has something to say.
Okay.
So the properties that this went across, these were not owned by individuals evidently at the time. There were no right-of-ways that had to be established, or what was the process?
Yeah, well, that's what I would like to know. I think Gail knows a little more about that than I do, but you had to petition the legislature to get that road, and when you read all the early accounts of towns being organized and stuff, in fact, Glover, I read all about Glover, went to the town clerk's office and read the first meeting books, and so Glover got organized in 1802. First thing they elected was a moderator, selectmen, and listers, and then they slowly added officers and eventually, quickly got to road surveyors, and there were about 5 of them. I mean, that was a big job to build the roads. That was like one of the main things they did, and they taxed people to support the roads, and if you didn't pay your tax, they listed your property at a tax sale, and some people got their property listed and they went to the tax sale and bought it right back again. But you had to get permission from the legislature, but then you got to tax everybody in town to help pay for it. And they could pay for it with their labor.